007 prepares for the big game with Le Chiffre and meets his lovely assistant, the girl from HQ, Miss Lind, and he's not too pleased about it. Alex Jennings reads Ian Fleming's Casino Royale.
Two weeks after his interview with M, James Bond awoke in his room at the Hotel Splendide. He had arrived at Royale les Eaux in time for luncheon 2 days before. There had been no attempt to contact him, and there had been no flicker of curiosity when he had signed the register, James Bond, Port Maria, Jamaica. M had expressed no interest in his cover. "Once you start to make a set at Le Chiffre at the tables, you'll have had it," he said. "But wear a cover that will stick with the general public." Bond knew Jamaica well, so he asked to be controlled from there, and to pass as a Jamaican plantocrat whose father had made his pile in tobacco and sugar, and whose son chose to play it away on the stock markets and in casinos. Bond had spent the last 2 afternoons and most of the nights at the casino playing complicated progression systems on the even chances at roulette. He had made some 3 million francs, and had given his nerves and card sense a thorough workout. He had got the geography of the casino clear in his mind. Above all, he had been able to observe Le Chiffre at the tables, and to note ruefully that he was a faultless and lucky gambler. Bond liked to make a good breakfast. After a cold shower, he looked out at the beautiful day, and consumed half a pint of iced orange juice, 3 scrambled eggs and bacon, and a double portion of coffee, without sugar. He lit his first cigarette, a Balkan and Turkish mixture made for him by Morlands of Grosvenor Street, and watched the small waves lick the long seashore. He was lost in his thoughts when the telephone rang. It was the concierge, announcing that a director of Radio Stangtor was waiting below with the wireless set he had ordered from Paris. "Of course," said Bond. "Send him up." This was the cover fixed by the 12e Bureau for their liaison man with Bond. Bond watched the door, hoping that it would be Matisse. When Matisse came in, a respectable businessman carrying a large square parcel by its leather handle, Bond smiled broadly, and would have greeted him with warmth if Matisse had not frowned and held up his free hand after carefully closing the door. "I have just arrived from Paris, monsieur, and here is the set you asked to have on approval." Bond lifted his eyebrows at this mystery-making. Matisse paid no attention. He placed the set, which he had unwrapped, on the floor beside the unlit panel electric fire below the mantelpiece. "It is just past 11, he said, "and I see that the Compagnon de la Chanson should now be on the medium wave from Rome. Let us see what the reception is like. It should be a fair test." Matisse winked. He fiddled at the back of the set. Suddenly an appalling roar of static filled the small room. "Oh, my dear monsieur, forgive me, please. Badly tuned." And he again bent to the dials. After a few adjustments, the close harmony of the French came over the air, and Matisse walked up and clapped Bond very hard on the back, and wrung his hand until Bond's fingers ached. "My dear friend," Matisse was delighted, "you are blown, blown, blown. Up there." He pointed at the ceiling. "At this moment either Monsieur Muntz or his alleged wife, allegedly bedridden with the grippe, is deafened, absolutely deafened, and I hope in agony." He grinned with pleasure at Bond's frown of disbelief. Then he became serious. "How it has happened, I don't know. They must have been on to you for several days before you arrived. The opposition is here in real strength. This is an old-fashioned hotel. There are disused chimneys behind these electric fires, just here." He pointed a few inches above the panel fire. "Is suspended a very powerful radio pickup. The wires run up the chimney to behind the Muntz's electric fire, where there is an amplifier. Some of this we knew because in France we are very clever. The rest we confirmed by unscrewing your electric fire a few hours before you got here." Suspiciously, Bond walked over and examined the screws which secured the panel to the wall. Their grooves showed minute scratches. "Now, to business," said Matisse. before our good compagnon ran out of breath. First of all, you will be pleased with your number 2. She is very beautiful. Bond frowned. Very beautiful indeed. Satisfied with Bond's reaction, Mattis continued. She has black hair, blue eyes, and splendid protuberances. And she is a wireless expert, which, though sexually less interesting, makes her a perfect employee of Radio Stantor and assistant to myself in my capacity as wireless salesman for this rich summer season down here. Bond was not amused. What the hell do they want to send me a woman for? He said bitterly. Do they think this is a bloody picnic? Calm yourself, my dear James. She's as cold as an icicle. Her cover's perfect, and I have arranged for her to team up with you quite smoothly. What is more natural than that you should pick up a pretty girl here as a Jamaican millionaire? He coughed respectfully. What with your hot blood and all, you would look naked without one. Bond grunted dubiously. Any other surprises? He asked suspiciously. Nothing very much, answered Matisse. Le Chiffre is installed in his villa. It's about 10 miles down the coast road. He has his 2 guards with him. They look pretty capable fellows. Anything else? Asked Bond. No. Come to the bar of the Hermitage before lunch. I'll fix the introduction. Ask her to dinner this evening. Then it will be natural for her to come into the casino with you. I'll be there too, but in the background. Oh, and there's an American called Leiter here, staying in the hotel. Felix Leiter. He's the CIA chap from Fontainebleau. London told me to tell you. He looks okay. May come in useful. A torrent of Italian burst from the wireless set on the floor. Mattis switched it off, and they exchanged some phrases about the set and about how Bond should pay for it. Then, with effusive farewells and a final wink, Mattis bowed himself out. Bond sighed. Women were for recreation. On a job, they got in the way and fogged things up with sex and hurt feelings. Bitch, said Bond. Then, remembering the Muntzes, he said, bitch again, more loudly, and walked out of the room. It was 12 o'clock when Bond left the Splendide, and the clock on the Marie was stumbling through its midday carillon. There was something splendid about the Negresco Baroque of the Casino Royale, a strong whiff of Victorian elegance and luxury. Against the background of this luminous and sparkling stage, Bond stood in the sunshine and felt his mission to be incongruous and remote. He shrugged away the momentary feeling of unease and walked round the back of his hotel and down the ramp to the garage. Before his rendezvous at the Hermitage, he decided to take his car down the coast road and have a quick look at Le Chiffre's villa. Bond's car was his only personal hobby. One of the last of the 4.5-litre Bentleys with the supercharger by Amherst Villas. He had bought it almost new in 1933 and had kept it in careful storage through the war. Bond drove it hard and well, and with an almost sensual pleasure. He eased the car out of the garage and up the ramp, and soon the loitering drumbeat of the 2-inch exhaust was echoing down the tree-lined boulevard, through the crowded main street of the little town, and off through the sand dunes to the south. An hour later, Bond walked into the Hermitage bar and chose a table near one of the broad windows. He ordered an Americano and examined the sprinkling of overdressed customers, mostly from Paris, he guessed, who sat talking with focus and vivacity, creating that theatrically clubbable atmosphere of l'heure de l'apéritif. Bond's eye was caught by the tall figure of Matisse on the pavement outside, his face turned in animation to a dark-haired girl in grey. Bond waited for them to come through the street door into the bar, but, for appearance's sake, continued to stare out of the window at the passers-by. "But surely it is Monsieur Bond!" Matisse's voice behind him was full of surprised delight. Bond, appropriately flustered, rose to his feet. "May I present my colleague, Mademoiselle Lind? My dear, this is a gentleman from Jamaica with whom I had the pleasure of doing business this morning." Bond inclined himself with a reserved friendliness. "It would be a great pleasure." He addressed himself to the girl. "I am alone. Would you both care to join me?" He pulled out a chair, and while they sat down, he beckoned to a waiter and, despite Mattis's expostulations, insisted on ordering the drinks. Mattis and Bond exchanged cheerful talk about the fine weather. The girl was silent. She accepted one of Bond's cigarettes, and then smoked it appreciatively, drawing the smoke deeply into her lungs with a little sigh, and then exhaling it casually through her lips and nostrils. Her movements were economical and precise, with no trace of self-consciousness. Bond felt her presence strongly. While he and Mattis talked, he turned from time to time towards her, politely including her in the conversation, but adding up the impressions recorded by each glance. Her hair was very black, and she wore it cut square and low on the nape of the neck, framing her face to below the clear and beautiful line of her jaw. Although it was heavy and moved with the movements of her head, she did not constantly pat it back into place, but let it alone. Her eyes were wide apart and deep blue, and they gazed candidly back at Bond with a touch of ironical disinterest which, to his annoyance, he found he would like to shatter, roughly. Bond was excited by her beauty and intrigued by her composure. The prospect of working with her stimulated him. At the same time, he felt a vague disquiet. On an impulse, he touched wood. Mattis had noticed Bond's preoccupation. After a time, he rose. "Oh, forgive me," he said to the girl. "I must arrange my rendezvous for dinner tonight. Are you sure you won't mind being left to your own devices this evening?" Bond took the cue, and as Mattis crossed the room to the telephone booth beside the bar, he said, "Well, if you are going to be alone tonight, would you care to have dinner with me?" She smiled with the first hint of conspiracy she had shown. "I would like to very much," she said. "And then perhaps you would chaperone me to the casino, where Monsieur Matisse tells me you are very much at home. Perhaps I will bring you luck." With Matisse gone, her attitude towards him showed a sudden warmth. She seemed to acknowledge that they were a team, and as they discussed the time and place of their meeting, Bond realized that it would be quite easy, after all, to plan the details of his project with her. When Matisse came back to the table, Bond called for his bill. The girl's eyes followed him out onto the boulevard. Matisse moved his chair close to hers and said softly, "That is a very good friend of mine. I am glad you have met each other. I can already feel the ice floes on the two rivers breaking up." He smiled. "I don't think Bond has ever been melted. It will be a new experience for him." She did not answer him directly. "He's very good-looking, but there's something cold and ruthless in his—" The sentence was never finished. Suddenly, a few feet away, the entire plate-glass window shivered into confetti. The blast of a terrific explosion, very near, hit them so that they were rocked back in their chairs. There was an instant of silence. Some objects pattered down onto the pavement outside. Bottles slowly toppled off the shelves behind the bar. Then there were screams and a stampede for the door. "Stay there," said Matisse. He kicked back his chair and hurtled through the empty window frame onto the pavement.